by Jon Cooper of Ourlands.com. And John, great to see you again. Thanks for always hopping on the show. Yesterday, Daniel Jeremiah said that there are 24 NFL starting caliber defensive tackles in this draft. And like that to me just boggles my mind that there's that many. But it does look like there's some dudes that can stuff the run in this thing.
Yeah. In fact, we actually counted 26 to 28 at this point in time that we think will have draftable grades. This is a terrific year for defensive tackles. And some of these edge guys are versatile enough that they can move down inside situationally. Shamir Stewart is a guy I think of that could be a really good 3 technique along with a 5 technique. He can play a wide 9, tremendous player. But he's one that we consider an edge rusher. But
a couple years ago, the Cowboys picked up Mozzie Smith from Michigan, and he's been, so far. How much was? I mean, he's a very good athlete. I don't know how good of a defensive tackle he is, but when it comes to the other 2 guys they have in Grant and I'm blanking on the other guy right now, but
Mason Graham,
yeah, Grant and Graham. Graham's, top 5 kind of caliber pick by a lot of services. Were they maybe like masking him a little bit, and because they were just so dominant up front?
If I remember it correctly, thinking back to Mozzie Smith, we were, a little hot and cold on him coming out. He had a great play down the stretch. He's a very good 2-gap player, physical against the run, and not much of a pass. He didn't have a whole lot of pass rush coming out. And I think that's, something that may be, critical. He's more of a space eater than maybe he is a 1-gap, a penetrate, disruptor type player. But, he was a solid, football player coming out. And, he may have been rated a little higher than he should have been.
John, what do you attribute the abundance of edge or defensive end talent, what have you, nowadays? Is it just we're talking about it and it's labeled or marketed a little bit differently? Obviously, the response to what offenses are doing as well, but why are we so flush with so many talented players in those areas?
Part of it, last year, we were saying, hey, wait till next year. We didn't like the class so much last year. There were maybe a couple of guys that had first-round grades, but there wasn't much there, and comparatively speaking. Those were good players, don't get me wrong, but this class is far superior. So I think it's just one of those things. This is a defensive draft. And, the edge position in particular, people want those guys. They want pass rushers. That's really important. So developing those guys is critical. And, if you're a 3-4 team, you're going to want somebody that might drop into coverage, a Kyle Van Noy type player. You're going to want somebody that can come off the edge. You're going to want some versatility there, depending upon your style. So, there's different kinds of players for different types of teams. The 5 technique, 3-4 wants that. The 4-3 team wants a guy with some bulk that can play the run. And, of course, everybody's going to be playing the nickel. The 4-2 look is going to be a predominant look for most teams. So you're going to have somebody that can line up on the edge and get to the passer. But those interior guys are critical too. Somebody's got to push the pocket. Somebody's got to make it easier. And then if somebody's going to draw a double team, you want somebody with great speed and quickness that can beat a guard, that can get to the quarterback. Those guys line up closer to the quarterback than the edge guys do. So if they can beat a single block, if you can find a defensive tackle like a Chris Jones, like a Matabike, somebody like that can beat the single block, he's worth his weight in gold.
How do you feel about where some of the wide receivers are stacking up for particularly in the first round? Are there 4 or 5 of them you think have that grade? It does seem to be in the middle of the draft. There's a lot of value there. I'm warning about the top.
as far as the guys that we're looking at the top of the draft, McMillan, and people go back and forth on him. He's a guy we like a lot. Luther Burden from Missouri is a guy that we like a lot and have, and after that, now you've got a lot of guys that, fall in the category. We think that another tier, we think that the wide receiver position in a lot of positions from about 25 down to about 95, there's not a lot of separation between those guys. And there's probably more guys that fit in those numbers of grades than there are players, than there are spots for those players. Some of the guys that you're talking about that are receivers down the line, Matthew Golden from Texas is a guy we really like as a receiver. We think he's come along, very well. And we think he's a possible first-round pick. Restrepo from Miami is a really nice slot-type receiver, very, very quick in and out of his breaks. He's a guy that we're pretty high on. It's a fairly Savion Williams is a guy. Bond is a guy. I mean, there's a pretty good group of wide receivers that fall maybe in the late first to second to almost to late second, early third round type players.
The old Texas Longhorns had a little bit of talent this year, didn't they, John? I mean, you just named off like 3 of their receivers there in Bond and Golden, and I mean, they've got like 10 other guys across the offensive and defensive sides of the ball that look like they're going to be drafted. Steve Sarkisian's built himself a little NFL draft machine down there in Austin these past couple of years.
Yeah, he sure has. I mean, that's a nice group of players coming out. Kelvin Banks is a lineman. He's, really, we have him very highly ranked. So it's a good group for sure.
What did you think coming out of East-West Shrine Bowl, Senior Bowl? Who jumped up your list the most?
It's, I'll tell you what, for that Senior Bowl, there were a lot of guys that really, made an impression on us. I could go on and on. Jack Kaiser from Notre Dame is a linebacker that we liked, but he really showed us something. We were really impressed with the way he played, down there at the Senior Bowl. Defensive tackle from Toledo, Darius Alexander, was very impressive. We liked what he did, and he jumped up a little bit, as far as we're concerned. Shamir Stewart from Texas A&M, we loved him before. We love him even more now. Mike Green from Marshall is an edge rusher that we know about, we like. And, he showed us that, this is a guy that could possibly be in that late, first-round conversation. We weren't in love with the offensive line play overall. Anthony Belton from NC State showed us something. We thought he was, a nice player. Elijah Arroyo from Miami, really, good tight end. He impressed us a lot, with what he did. Azari Thomas, the cornerback from Florida State, he was a guy that also showed us, that he can play. And now we liked him before. I mean, it's not that we haven't. It's just that it kind of confirms some things that we knew. Billy Bowman from Oklahoma. And I'll tell you another guy, last one I'll mention, Sebastian Castro from Iowa. We looked at him as kind of a hybrid, a big nickel type guy. But he played, over the top, and he really impressed us as a quality safety. And so we think he helped his stock, during the Senior Bowl week.
What did you think about Jack Besh of TCU?
Oh, yeah, that's another one. That's another guy. Thank you for mentioning him, that he had a great week. Besides, winning the MVP and all of that, he had a terrific week as well. He caught the ball. He was physical, get off the line, and he showed he can run routes. Good route runner. Solid week. And
the last player I have to ask you about, John, is I'm very curious about Willie Lampkin of North Carolina. Is a guard or center, right? But he's not very big. He's the smallest offensive lineman, maybe in the NFL when he gets there. What do you think his projections are?
Well, he flashed a little bit, but he did not, in our minds, have a real great week. He had some struggles with some power rushes, which we thought he might have. In fact, he did some good things. He showed really good quickness, snap and step. And, we think he's best as a center. He's got a lot of what we would call quick twitch. And we think he has enough length to hang on and be a guy that can make a team and possibly be a starter in the NFL. But he's pretty one-dimensional. He's gonna be a center, and his quickness and his balance are the things that are going to be his selling points, and he's got a chance to be okay. But like I say, he's one-dimensional. I don't see him going real high in the draft. Not a great year for centers though, so somebody's got to play.
Centers and quarterbacks, right? Are those the two ones you'd maybe struggle to find starters at this year?
Yeah, I would say so. Offensive line in general is not as good, but there's definitely some good tackles that are going to help people. And there's some good guards too, especially at the top of the draft. There's some solid players. But the depth in the offensive line overall is not as strong as we've seen it in some other years.
John, this is David Smoke. We had Ed Too-Tall-Jones on earlier today. He's being inducted to the Texas Sports Hall of Fame, 1974, number 1 overall pick. And you just think about that story. He didn't even play but like 2 or 3 games in high school. He was a basketball player. Do you ever is it ever possible anymore for anyone to slip through the cracks where nobody knows who they are?
Well, it's a lot harder than it used to be, but it does happen. The Jets corner that came out of Canada did not play college football last year. He went and played in some screwy league. I forget what it was. It was a 7-on-7 league. And then he played in Canada for a year. He was a dominant player in Canada. And so, yeah, it can happen. I mean, there's a perfect example. Didn't play college football. His name escapes me right now, but he was a corner from last year that was from Canada and is with the Jets. So it happens. Eric Swan is not that long ago.
Eric Swan, that's the one. Yeah, Eric Swan.
Not that long ago.
No, you're right.
And I'm dating myself, I guess. 1991 or something like that was when he came out. So that's been a while. But no, it can definitely still happen.
How much and how far ahead of curve were the Cowboys and Gil Brandt in finding talent? Because he seemed to be someone that would drive anywhere, no matter what state it might be, to find Cornell Green or someone like that.
They were very advanced, and I can tell you a story because John Wooten was a friend of mine, and he got his start with the Cowboys as a scout, and I also coached at Benedictine University. I wasn't coaching there at the time, but there was this very, very small quarterback named Bill Callahan, and he is now the offensive line coach for the Cleveland Browns, and he came from the Dallas Cowboys to look at Bill Callahan, and he was working for National Football Scouting with the Cowboys, with the Cowboys, I should say. But he had a national thing, and when I took the job there, it was the thing that he had put up there to measure Bill Callahan. Too short, but anyway, that's the story. That's the Dallas Cowboys.
That's amazing.
There was no stone left unturned in those days.
And John, we were very good friends with Gil, and I can tell you, if you were any kind of football nerd, the ultimate conversation was Gil Brandt, because he would tell you, like, I saw a punter in Schenectady that was amazing, and then you're like, why are you there? Don't you? Like, no, I got on a plane and a bus and a train to get there in 1968. And you're like, this is unbelievable.
Trust me, from that experience alone, my experience with John telling me stories about where he was sent to look for players, it just, no question about it. And of course, they built a great program starting in 1960.
Yeah, they did. From scratch, from ground floor.
No, they didn't, and they did not have a pool of players that they could draw on, because they decided on the franchise too late, and so they were not able to get, how in most expansion years you're able to select 2 or 3 players from each team, and the Cowboys didn't have that opportunity. So they were more from scratch probably than any expansion team ever was.
Hard work, man. You got to find your ways to not cut corners by any means, but to beat the competition. And the stories he used to tell us about some of these guys, like the one you just mentioned with John Wooten, is fantastic. Has anybody at all that may have been, let's say first-round talent, Has anybody done anything at all, and I'm not talking even off the field, but that has maybe that maybe has hurt their value with anything that's gone on? Any games, all-star games, et cetera?
Well, there's one quarterback that comes to mind that down the stretch, I wouldn't call him. He might have been first-round talent. Maybe he still is. I don't know. Jaxson from Mississippi. His last 3 games, particularly last one, he really struggled, and he looked pretty good down at the Senior Bowl. But those games, there were a couple of of situations and clutch situations where he really had trouble. There was a slight adjustment that wasn't made, we believe, in watching the film, and there's some definite concerns because he did not play well those last 3 games. It's a one-read type offense that he's playing in, so it's not complicated. But that was we thought was a guy that may have hurt himself down the stretch this year. As far as him, because people were talking about him as a first-round pick, and he was probably the best quarterback at the Senior Bowl. So he may have, got himself back in the good graces of scouts. But we'll have to see, whether that affected him that much or not.
Thank you, John. Appreciate it. It's always great to have you, Jon Cooper, Ourlands Guide to the NFL Draft. Usually on Wednesdays with us, back to getting him in the rotation on the draft. We got well over 2 months before it was there.